Horizon just wants to reaction. This is why war in Ukraine is causing apocalyptic famine. Part 2, I guess. The channel RealLifeLore. Did the first portion of it, I guess, a day or two ago. Yeah, this is this whole, first of all, series about the current conflict from RealLifeLore, at least the Russian-Ukraine situation. RealLifeLore is covering that really greatly, I guess. I haven't seen any video that talks about in detail like RealLifeLore does here, so that is incredible. And the famine aspect of things, basically, it's just this is like a butterfly effect, analyzed in a way, right? I mean, things are going to accumulate over time. And yeah, every time I say future is grim and people are like, chill out, everything's going to be fine. But yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. First of all, pandemic screwed us over, right? Now war, I've said this many times in the past that we are, chained in a way, every economy of the world is chained in a way that any small thing here and there, right? A small recession in a country, good enough major country, causes issue all around the world, right? Nearly breaks everybody. Now add that war to it, a major war like this, Russia, Ukraine, holy shit, right? And especially Ukraine, Ukraine and Russia being one of the big countries that export grains of all around the world. Yeah, there's going to be lots of shortages. Famine was already predicted by UN before the war broke out, so war is going to add to it incredibly. And yeah, also some people commented about, first of all, the Turkey thing. I said that, why would Russia care about some legal shit, right? They would just, I guess, come up with some excuse to basically, just force their way in. But obviously people said that it's going to be really costly for the Russia if they try to do anything. That kind of makes sense, right? I mean, Turkey has a great defense in there. So yeah, Russia would be hit really badly if they try anything. And as far as Russia's thing, Russia don't need to pressure. They are one of the bigger grain countries. I know that. I was talking about pressure in a way that, breaking Ukraine, right? So they don't have any money coming in, so they can buy any defenses, something like that. I was talking in that way, like if they would block any grain get exported from Ukraine, so money stops in Ukraine, right? When you're war, you don't just attack somebody, you attack from all front. You try to make sure the economy falls too. So in that aspect, I'm talking about. All right, let's watch part 2, I guess.
Because their dealings with the West, Ukraine, and Russia have all been fairly ambiguous at best. On the one hand, Turkey has sold dozens of their highly effective combat drones to the Ukrainian military in their fight against Russia, while on the other hand, they've refused to implement any financial sanctions upon Russia, and they continue to allow many of the Russian oligarchs to park their super yachts safely within Turkish territorial waters. Turkey has purchased
Look, to that front, I'm going to say, people need to understand how global politics works, right? Just because somebody doesn't condemn something doesn't automatically mean that they are the evil and they're in the wrong side. There is more to it than that. They have to, see their position in the world, right? They have to think of themselves, their country, and their people first before anything else, right? So even people would condemn condemn something, but not necessarily will take action against it because of this. India is also one of the example. India is condemning it, but not taking any action against it because India is surrounded by China and Pakistan, for fuck's sake. Right? If they make Russia enemy, who's going to come to the India's rescue? India is not powerful enough to take on China and Pakistan just like that. Right? I mean, they are fine, but they can directly, go against that.
Against S-400 missile systems from the Russians in the past and incurred American financial sanctions in response. The Turks have allowed the Russians to build out 2 natural gas pipelines across the Black Sea and their own territory that grants Moscow a further ability to route their natural gas supplies around Ukraine. But then, at the same time, Turkey and Russia have supported opposite sides during the Armenia-Azerbaijan war in 2020, as well as opposite sides during the Syrian and Libyan civil wars further away from home. Ultimately, Turkey pursues whatever policy is within Turkey's own better interests at the moment. And despite being a member of NATO, they'll cooperate with the Russians whenever it suits them, and they'll cooperate with NATO whenever it suits them. And when it comes to convoys and NATO warships operating in support of the Ukrainians within the Black Sea, it remains to be seen which side they would ultimately land on. This is all ultimately why there really aren't any...
so see, it's all about what benefits anybody. That's how all countries work, right? First of all, what was that? Denmark, Sweden, Denmark, who was trying to join NATO? So Turkey, first of all, said, no, I'm going to veto that. They, I think, vetoed it, right? And recently they're like, okay, we're fine with it now, right? I guess it just, I don't know if, taking that level of 180 is like considered honorable or whatever. I don't know how to say that. But yeah, obviously people are gonna, assume what's best for their country and their people first before doing anything else.
Good solutions to fix this looming global starvation problem coming from around the Black Sea. The West blames the Russians for engineering the crisis, while the Russians are blaming the West for imposing sanctions upon them. Moscow has offered to loosen up the blockade and allow the Ukrainian grain shipments to continue in exchange for the West relenting on their financial sanctions, which they've so far refused to do, accusing the Russians of holding the Ukrainian food as a hostage in the negotiations. Antonio Guterres, the current serving United Nations Secretary General, has stated his opinion that a compromise should be made wherein the Russians agree to lift the blockade in exchange for the West relenting on many of the sanctions that have been placed on Russian and Belarusian fertilizer products.
Wait a second. Look, I'm not in anyone's side right now, but if you lift the sanctions, what was the point of sanctions? It's like, I don't know. It's if you want to just pressure Russia into corners so they stop attacking Ukraine, then you cannot ease off. I mean, I don't know how to. What's the mentality for sanctions, right? Sanctions are because Russia is attacking Ukraine. So, make them desperate enough that they say, okay, we, announce ceasefire or whatever. We're not going to attack Ukraine or whatever, right? That's the whole point of sanctions. But if you lay off from the sanctions, what was the point of sanctions to begin with, right? I mean, if the goal isn't to, completely corner Russia and so Russia gives up with the war, if that's not the plan, what's the point of sanctions?
But, to be honest, that seems pretty unlikely because as the Russian army continues to struggle and fails to make any big gains on the Ukrainian battlefield, their shifting strategy towards economic warfare is only likely to continue. The blockade of Ukraine's ports, from the perspective of Moscow, is generally intended to strangle the Ukrainian economy into submission by simultaneously blocking their exports from leaving and blocking most imports of weapons, food, and cash from entering by sea. The side effect of this blockade preventing critical food shipments from reaching hungry countries across the Middle East, North Africa, and Eastern Africa is, if anything, a bonus to the Kremlin's greater geopolitical objectives. Because the massive levels of instability that it's going to cause in all of these places has the very high potential to trigger another round of revolutions and mass migration that is likely headed straight in the direction of the European Union, just like during 2015. Since Europe has already taken in nearly 8 million refugees now fleeing from the war in Ukraine since the war began, millions of additional refugees coming to the continent from the Middle East and North Africa will inevitably become politically turbulent. And this is almost certainly what Putin and the Kremlin are actually banking on. They have no geopolitical incentives to actually end this blockade. And as a result, it's going...
Yeah, what are they from the Bond movie? Like, plotting and shit with the cat, right? I mean, yeah, we're not going to put the blockade. So, the more migrants go there, more unrest. Yeah, everything is chaos. That's benefit to us. Really?
To cause one of the greatest humanitarian catastrophes of the 21st century. And then, to make this horrific situation even worse, further problems around the world since the invasion began have added even further fuel to the already raging fire. Fertilizer worldwide is currently in a short supply for a number of factors. Fertilizer production within the United States last year was hurt tremendously by the Great North American Winter Storm in February that became the costliest natural disaster in American history, as it devastated states from New York to Texas and caused nearly $200 billion in economic damages. Hurricane Ida that struck the coast of Louisiana later on in August caused even more devastation, adding a further $75 billion more in natural disaster-induced economic damages to America for the year, and disrupting America's production of fertilizer even further. Then, China, the world's third largest exporter of urea, a critical raw material that's used to create nitrophosphate fertilizer, completely banned all of their urea exports back in December in the wake of their zero-COVID lockdown policies. And then, following the Western sanctions placed upon Russia after their invasion, Moscow decided to retaliate by suspending all of their own fertilizer exports, which is pretty bad for the global market, because of the 3 main types of industrial fertilizer, Russia ranks in the top 3 biggest global exporters in all of them. Back in 2021, a total
What
of
the fuck, man? How many things are an issue like that? Everything is kind of collecting. We don't even have fucking fertilizer. How to make any crops or anything. How to farm to begin with. That is causing issue in itself. Yeah, if anybody was religious, right? Basically, Bible people, they were like, oh, there you go, apocalypse is coming. These are all the signs.
25 countries worldwide imported more than 30% of their fertilizers from Russia alone, and they probably won't be getting any of that supply this year. All of this has contributed to a skyrocketing price for fertilizers worldwide, which has inevitably made the process of farming more expensive for farmers across the world and will decrease global crop yields this year. And then, in India and Pakistan, the most severe spring heat wave seen in the subcontinent in more than 100
Seriously, man. Seriously. I mean, obviously, I'm sitting here in my room in AC, but still, when I go out, like this year was fucked up. I'm not gonna lie. It's like it reached like, mid 40s. Like, holy shit. If it reached mid 30s, I'm like, oh, that's it, too much. Mid 40s? Yeah, I couldn't even walk outside. That is just ridiculous. So, the heat level that happened, heat wave after heat wave since March. March is not hot, right? Never. March is never hot, right? I mean, hot in India level hot. Right, but it was in 40s in March. Like, what the fuck? In March, we are in 40s? That scared me. Like, what is happening?
120 years struck in March, bringing drought and rainfall levels only a quarter to a third of normal. This historic heat wave struck during the final weeks of the wheat growing season in India, killing many of the plants before they could actually be harvested. And as a result, and in addition to the skyrocketing prices of wheat and fertilizer owing to the fallout from the war in Ukraine, on the 13th of May, the Indian government, which is ordinarily the world's 10th largest exporter of wheat, imposed an almost complete ban on the country's wheat exports, with minimal exceptions. There are currently 26 countries around the world that have now issued serious restrictions on food exports, including the Russians, who partially banned their own wheat and corn exports following the Western sanctions. In total, all of these export restrictions combined from these 26 countries are currently restricting roughly 15% of all the calories that are normally traded worldwide, which I cannot stress enough will become an absolute catastrophe if it isn't resolved very quickly. There are some
God, I don't even know what to think right now. I mean, the recession is coming. Everybody knows that, right? At best in a year or something. USA will be under recessions, basically, so the world will be under recession. So it feels like, holy shit, everything is aligning. Everything is aligning. Every fertilizer issues, the war, the pandemic, right? Recession is coming, like I said. Now, because of the heat waves, like in India and other places, drought, there are no food. People are conserving food. How the fuck did we get from pre-war, pre-COVID, like we are entering a new age, new technology, new science. We are going to Mars. We're gonna have robots in future. We are gonna perfect AI and every other shit. Like, oh, look at that, we are entering a new age, new technology. All the issues of the past will feel like smaller, and we are back to square one. We are gonna fight over food now. Right, recession, shortage of food. The next 4 or 5 years is going to be really fucked up.
Creative methods that have been proposed that could help solve the problem, but they all have a number of associated cons. While increasing the supply of food this year is going to be very difficult, perhaps it would be easier to ease off of the demand. For example, roughly 10% of all the grains grown worldwide are currently being used to produce biofuel, and roughly 18% of all vegetable oils are used to produce biodiesel. Demand for biofuels have exploded recently as many countries around the world have tried to find alternatives to fossil fuels, but their production is having a huge impact on the availability of our finite and stretched food supply to feed the world right now. According to Grow Intelligence, a data firm specializing in agriculture, the calories that are currently being diverted to produce biofuels could soon be enough to feed the equivalent of the annual needs of 1.9 billion humans. Temporarily overturning
Damn.
and repealing biofuel mandates across the world could therefore greatly lessen the blow from this current food crisis. But even more consuming than biofuels are animals.
I know what one must be thinking, like, okay, let's restrict all the biofuel, right? Tell companies to basically pay more for the fuel, right? Restrict fuel, make it more efficient all around, that there is no wastage, right? But again, recession is coming, right? I mean, if you add restrictions like that on top of recession and make things more costlier for companies, yeah, I don't see that happening. I don't see any Congress agreeing to that. So we are backed in a corner in a weird way right now. But yeah, I mean, there are many solutions that, it might feel a bit strong right now, but overall in few years, a long term, this could be a real solution, like, diverting to something like, hydro dams, right? Solar panels and shit like that. Some plants. I mean, what, Musk is saying, right? Creating some kind of a solar plant. Creating big ass place where you can store battery and supply it, right? He's already trying to do that in Texas and God knows where, right? In Australia, he was trying to do it. I don't know if he got permission there. But hey, you can do shit like that, right? You don't need biofuel, right? We have things right now. It might feel costly, but if you do it at big scale everywhere, it's not going to be costly. You just need someone to push this idea through, and you just, be aggressive with it. Right? Rather than play it safe. Everybody's going to play safe, then nobody's going to do anything. And this is just downward spiral.
Year in 2021, the Chinese alone imported a record-breaking 28 million tons of corn, which is more than what Ukraine ordinarily exports in an entire year, and it was all simply to feed their pigs. Nearly 1/3 of all the corn grown in America is simply used to feed cattle, along with roughly 40% of the European Union's entire crop of wheat.
I think it was CGP Gray's video which talked about like how much people eat cows and things like that, like cattle basically, and how much cattle there is, right? And how you can fill certain entire continents, just that's how many cattle are in the world. Like, what the fuck?
Simply cutting down a bit on the feed for the world's livestock herd for just a moment could do wonders to get us through this current food crisis. But since it would inevitably and conversely mean skyrocketing costs in meat and dairy products worldwide, it will almost certainly face enormous backlash and difficulties. Ultimately,
nothing's gonna happen. I mean, I think it was John Oliver's video that talked about how drought in California is happening. There were certain farmers that had to use certain level of water, otherwise their water license gets revoked. You have to use this level of water on your farm, otherwise they just assume you're not farming and you're just wasting time. So they grow crops that require more water just so the license don't get revoked at the time of a drought in California. And this is California. And you expect any other countries to be more conservative with their resources? Governments don't function that efficiently. So I don't know how people are going to resolve this. All the ideas that RealLifeLore is saying here would work, but nobody's going to do that, let's be honest. No Congress is going to do any of this shit.
Presently aren't really any easy solutions to this problem, one of the greatest faced by us so far in the 21st century. And the countries that will suffer the worst are the most vulnerable and the ones most heavily dependent upon foreign imports of food, especially the ones that are usually reliant on grain shipments coming in from around the Black Sea, like all of these ones across the Middle East, North Africa, and Eastern Africa, but most critically, Lebanon, Egypt, and Yemen, who will each struggle to acquire alternative supplies of grain that they need to feed their populations this year. Expect that many of these countries are going to have a lot of problems and even worse instability than usual within the next 9 months from when this video was posted. This is a global problem that is the culmination of both global climate change and global geopolitics. At the epicenter of the problem, however, are the geopolitical realities revolving around the Black Sea, a body of water that has caused problems for the world's food supply plenty of times in the past. In 1915, the Ottoman Empire had joined the Germans in the First World War and used their control over the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles to block all of the grain exports from the Russian Empire, which at the time included Ukraine, from entering onto the global market. This has always been the greatest weakness of these rich agricultural fields in southern Ukraine and Russia across the Eurasian steppe. that ultimately, the best and really only way to get the massive amounts of grain that can be grown on them out to feed the hungry masses of the world can be completely blocked by whomever controls the access to this choke point, the gates to the Mediterranean. During the First World
yeah, it has been a pretty important place throughout the years, especially if that's how the Byzantine Empire worked because of this strategic position.
War, the Allies were so desperate to break these gates open and free up the Russian and Ukrainian grain shipments that they landed at the beaches of Gallipoli near to the Dardanelles and suffered 250,000 casualties before retreating in defeat.
Damn.
And now, once again in modern times, NATO finds itself in a highly similar historical circumstance to the Entente powers of 1915. They must find a way to get Ukraine's enormous supply of grains out past the Russian naval blockade in order to feed the world, or the world will suffer a catastrophe of unprecedented scale in the 21st century. In these times, perhaps more than anywhere else in the world, the Black Sea represents the largest convergence of competing global powers. And this is precisely what makes it the most unstable and one of the most strategically important bodies of water to be found anywhere on the planet. It is at the epicenter of the conflict between NATO, the United States, Ukraine, and Russia, the largely independent ambitions of an increasingly expansionist Turkey, and the recent ambitions of China's own Belt and Road Initiative that aims to use the sea as a trade bridge from Asia to Europe. Under more normal times, a massive 898 million tons of cargo passes through the Turkish Straits between the Black and Aegean Seas per year, which is about 70% of the same amount of cargo that passes through the much more thought about and strategically considered Suez Canal in Egypt. The Turkish Straits continue to be one of the most strategically important choke points found anywhere in the world, as they have been for thousands of years now, ever since the Romans first founded Constantinople. And today, they are placed immediately adjacent to the world's most
saying Constantine saw that and like, yeah, this is the best fucking place strategically. I mean, he wasn't a moron, right? I mean, we know how badass and how Chad Constantine was. So there's a reason why he created a city there.
Politically unstable body of water. An unprecedented 10 wars and conflicts have been fought around the shores of the Black Sea since just the end of the Cold War in 1991. More than any other body of water in the world, including the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, the two wars fought between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the status of Nagorno-Karabakh, the 2014 first Russian invasion of Ukraine when they annexed Crimea and started the war in the Donbass, the 2008 Russian invasion of Georgia, and the occupations of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, the previous Georgian Civil War and the Georgian-Abkhaz War, and the Transnistria conflict inside of Moldova, which happens to be the subject of the most recent episode in my ongoing Modern Conflict series that I just published to Nebula, which, as you've almost certainly heard by now, is home to tons of exclusive, ad-free content from dozens of
yeah, people, go to curiositystream.com/, I guess, coupon or something. Just go to original video page link. From there, click on the curiositystream.com link there. Yeah, his, this whole series, current conflict thing. I've been only watching the one that he has been posting on YouTube, which is the Russia-Ukraine thing, which has been the awesome one. So this is his thing, right? He should do this more and more, and he's posting that in Curiosity Stream's website. But these are really good videos all around. But yeah, the famine, oh fuck me, I still remember those photos, right? From drought, famine, kids, people, just their bones can be seen through skin. It just hurts thinking about it. And thinking that this is gonna happen to people that are alive right now in future. God, I hope somebody basically figure something out or something. I don't know, if famine happens, yeah, it's just fucked up to think about that, right? Kids are gonna starve like that, holy shit. Right, well, that was why war in Ukraine is causing apocalyptic famine. Everything is aligning, goddamn, right? Like I said, religious people will think like, oh, this is a sign, it's an apocalypse coming, because you would think that, right? Everything is aligning. Recession, right? A shortage of grain because of war, and now shortage of fertilizer. Everything is kind of fucking aligning. This is really after global warming. How much heat there is. Temperature is constantly rising. Like what happened in India. I fucking as soon as the March came out, like, okay, heat wave of 44 degrees Celsius. Like, what the fuck, in March? It was like 3rd of March or something, early March. Right, people? I'll see you next time.